I stood in the middle of that glittering engagement party, holding a champagne glass in one hand and a stained tissue in the other. The one that had touched my sister's weapon of choice? A soiled diaper she'd tried to shove in my 7-year-old daughter's face. My voice cut through the classical music and polite chatter like a knife through silk. "This is the woman you're marrying. Richard." A woman who thought it was funny to humiliate a child with actual human waste. The room fell silent. Victoria's perfectly made-up face went from porcelain white to crimson red in seconds. And that was the moment everything changed. But before I tell you how it all fell apart, if you're enjoying this story of standing up against toxic family members, please hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories like this, and drop a comment below telling me about your own experiences with difficult family dynamics. Your support means everything. Now, let me take you back to where this nightmare really began. 6 months earlier, I was a completely different person. I was the Sarah who apologized for existing life. The Sarah who made herself small so Victoria could shine brighter. The Sarah who had been conditioned since childhood to believe that keeping the peace meant swallowing my pain. My daughter Chloe and I lived in a modest apartment across town from my parents' sprawling house. The house where Victoria still had her old bedroom preserved like a shrine. While my childhood room had been converted into my father's home office within months of my moving out, every family gathering was a performance. And I had perfected my role as the supportive younger sister. The one who smiled through gritted teeth while Victoria took credit for my ideas. Borrowed money she never repaid, and made subtle digs about my failed marriage and single motherhood. My parents, Eleanor and Robert, had long ago chosen their favorite, and it wasn't me. Victoria was their golden child, the successful marketing executive with the perfect hair, perfect clothes, and perfect ability to manipulate every situation to her advantage. The warning signs had always been there. When we were teenagers, Victoria had destroyed my prom dress the night before the dance, claiming it was an accident with bleach. She'd borrowed my car and returned it with an empty tank and a dent she never acknowledged. She'd told my high school boyfriend lies about me cheating, effectively ending that relationship. But the worst part wasn't Victoria's cruelty. It was my parents' enabling. Every time I tried to speak up, I was met with the same tired responses. "Victoria didn't mean it. You're being too sensitive. Family is family. Sarah, you need to be the bigger person." I had been the bigger person for 28 years. I had swallowed my hurt, my anger, my sense of injustice, all in the name of family harmony. But then Chloe was born, and suddenly I had someone more important than myself to protect. For 3 years after her birth, I maintained the charade, showing up to family dinners, letting Victoria make snide comments about my parenting, enduring my mother's not-so-subtle comparisons between Chloe and Victoria's friends' children who were apparently smarter, prettier, better behaved. The breaking point came on an ordinary Tuesday evening. My mother had called that morning, her voice dripping with false sweetness, insisting that Chloe and I come to dinner. "Victoria has some exciting news to share," she'd said. I knew what that meant. Victoria had probably gotten another promotion, or bought another designer handbag, or was dating someone new. The exciting news was always just another opportunity for my parents to fawn over their favorite daughter while I sat there, invisible. We arrived 15 minutes late because Chloe's daycare had called about a slight fever, and I'd needed to pick her up early and assess whether she was well enough for the dinner. The moment we walked through that familiar front door, I felt the familiar knot in my stomach, the one that had been my constant companion since childhood. The house smelled of my mother's signature pot roast, and I could hear the clink of wine glasses from the living room. Victoria was already there. Of course, positioned on the cream-colored sofa like a queen holding court. A glass of Pinot Noir in her manicured hand. She was wearing a dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent, her highlighted hair falling in perfect waves around her shoulders. When she saw us, her lips curved into that smile I'd come to recognize as the precursor to cruelty. "Oh, look who decided to grace us with her presence," Victoria said, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Princess Chloe and her less-than-perfect mother. She emphasized the word less with particular venom. Chloe's small hand tightened in mine. At 7 years old, she was already learning to recognize the undertones of adult meanness. And it broke my heart. "Hi," Aunt Vic, she said quietly, her voice small. Victoria set down her wine glass and stood up, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor as she approached us. Aunt Vic, I thought I told you to call me Queen Victoria. Sweetie, remember. Her tone was saccharine, but her eyes were cold. Chloe looked up at me, confused and a little frightened. But you're not a real queen, she said, her 7-year-old logic trying to make sense of an adult game she didn't understand. What happened next unfolded so quickly that my mind barely had time to process it before my body reacted. Victoria's expression shifted from fake sweetness to something darker. She turned on her heel and walked to the changing table that my cousin had set up in the corner of the living room for her 6-month-old baby. Without hesitation, Victoria reached down and picked up a soiled diaper that had clearly just been used, the smell immediately permeating the air around us. Time seemed to slow down as Victoria walked back toward Chloe, holding that disgusting diaper with a paper napkin, her smile now openly malicious. If you don't know how to respect the queen, she said, leaning down toward my daughter's face, maybe you need to learn some humility. She moved to bring the diaper closer to Chloe's face, and something inside me snapped. All those years of swallowed rage, of silent suffering, of being the bigger person, they all came rushing to the surface like a dam breaking. I lunged forward, grabbed the diaper from Victoria's hand, and threw it onto the floor. Victoria, stop it right now. My voice came out as a roar, something I didn't even recognize as my own. Chloe was already crying, her small body shaking against my leg as I pulled her behind me, creating a barrier between her and my sister. My mother came rushing in from the kitchen, her face flushed from cooking and wine. Sarah, what are you doing? Victoria was just playing around. Just playing around. Those words echoed in my head like a death knell. I looked at my mother, really looked at her, and saw not the woman who was supposed to protect me, but someone who had chosen sides long ago and would never change. My father appeared from his study, newspaper still in hand, his reading glasses perched on his nose. He didn't even look alarmed, just annoyed. What's all this noise about? He asked, his tone suggesting we were children, squabbling over toys. Not a grown woman who had just tried to put human waste in a child's face. Your daughter, I said, my voice shaking with fury, just tried to shove a dirty diaper in Chloe's face because she didn't call her Queen Victoria. And you're asking about noise. Victoria had already recovered her composure, her face morphing into an expression of wounded innocence. Oh my God. Sarah, you're making such a big deal out of nothing. It was a joke, right? Mom, Dad, tell her it was just a joke. My mother moved to Victoria's side, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. Sarah, honey, you're overreacting. Victoria would never really hurt Chloe. You know she adores her niece. You're just too sensitive. You always have been. I looked at my father, hoping for even a shred of support, but he simply shook his head and returned to his armchair. If you can't control your temper, Sarah, perhaps you and Chloe should leave. We were having a perfectly nice evening until you arrived. Control my temper. Until I arrived? The words struck me like physical blows. I had spent my entire life controlling my temper, controlling my hurt, controlling my need to be seen and valued. And where had it gotten me? Standing in my parents' living room, my daughter traumatized, being blamed for defending her from abuse that everyone else wanted to call a joke. Victoria was already hamming it up, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue she'd pulled from her designer purse. I can't believe you. Sarah, today was supposed to be special. I was going to announce my engagement to Richard, and you've ruined everything. Engagement. Of course. The exciting news was that Victoria had managed to trap another wealthy, successful man into her web. Richard Crawford, the CEO of a tech startup. Old money family. Everything my parents could want in a son-in-law. I'd met him twice before at family gatherings, and he'd seemed nice enough, if a bit oblivious to Victoria's true nature. Most people were, at least at first. I've ruined everything, I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. I bent down and picked up the soiled diaper using the napkin Victoria had dropped, holding it up like evidence in a trial. This is what your precious Victoria tried to use on my daughter. My 7-year-old daughter. Because she didn't stroke Victoria's ego the right way. And you're telling me I'm the one ruining things? My mother's face went pale, but her loyalty didn't waver. Put that down. Sarah, you're being disgusting. I'm being disgusting. The laugh that escaped my throat sounded unhinged even to my own ears. I'm not the one who thought this was appropriate behavior around a child. Victoria had stopped fake crying now, her mask slipping to reveal the venomous core underneath. You've always been jealous of me, Sarah, ever since we were kids. You can't stand that I'm successful, that I'm getting married to an amazing man, that Mom and Dad actually like spending time with me. So you create these ridiculous dramas to get attention. Chloe was still crying against my leg, her little hands fisted in my jeans. I looked down at her tear-stained face, saw the confusion and fear in her eyes, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. This wasn't about me anymore. This wasn't about the years of favoritism, the borrowed money, never repaid, the credit stolen, the manipulation. This was about my daughter, and what lessons she would learn about self-worth, about standing up to bullies, about what family should actually mean. I knelt down to Chloe's level, wiping her tears with my thumb. Baby, we're going to leave now, and we're not coming back to this house. Not until people here learn how to treat us with respect. Can you be brave for me? Chloe nodded, hiccuping through her tears. I stood up, picked her up even though she was getting too big for it, and looked at each of them in turn. My mother, wringing her hands, but standing firmly beside Victoria. My father, already returning his attention to his newspaper, as if we weren't worth his focus. And Victoria, smirking now that she'd gotten away with it again. You want to know what this is really about, I said. My voice steady now, calm with the certainty of a decision made. This is about the fact that you've created a monster, and you refuse to see it. You've enabled Victoria's cruelty for so long that she thinks she can do anything without consequences. Well, here's a consequence. We're done. Chloe and I are done being your punching bags. Done being the ones who have to be understanding and forgiving, while Victoria gets to do whatever she wants. Sarah, don't be dramatic. My mother started, but I cut her off. We're leaving, and we won't be back. Not for holidays, not for birthdays, not for Victoria's wedding. You've made your choice about who matters in this family, and now I'm making mine. I walked to the door, Chloe's face buried in my neck, her tears soaking through my shirt. Behind me, I could hear Victoria's voice, shrill and triumphant. Good, let the trash take itself out. We'll be better off without you dragging down the family name anyway. My hand was on the doorknob when I turned back one last time. You know what the saddest part is? I would have forgiven almost anything you did to me. But I will never forgive what you tried to do to my child. And one day, Victoria, one day that mask you wear is going to slip in front of someone who matters. And no one will be there to make excuses for you anymore. The door closed behind us with a soft click that sounded like an ending and a beginning all at once. Chloe lifted her head from my shoulder as we walked to the car. Mommy, she whispered, her voice hoarse from crying. Why do they hate us? I buckled her into her car seat, kissing her forehead. They don't hate us. Baby! They're just so focused on making one person happy that they forgot how to see anyone else. But that's their problem, not ours. We're going to be okay. As I drove away from that house, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw Chloe's small face, exhausted from crying, staring out the window. And I made myself a promise. This wouldn't break her. I wouldn't let the toxicity of my family seep into her life the way it had seeped into mine. Whatever it took, I would protect her. And I would teach her that self-respect matters more than keeping the peace. The next few weeks were harder than I'd anticipated. My phone blew up with messages from my mother, alternating between guilt, tripping about how I was destroying the family, and veiled threats about being written out of the will. Victoria sent text after text, some trying the sweet sister angle, others openly hostile. My father called once, his voice gruff and uncomfortable, telling me I was being unreasonable and needed to apologize to Victoria for ruining her special announcement. I blocked them all. Each number, each avenue of contact, I systematically cut off. It felt like amputating a diseased limb, painful but necessary for survival. Chloe had nightmares for a week, waking up crying, asking if Aunt Victoria was going to come to our apartment. I held her, sang to her, promised her that no one would hurt her, that Mommy would always protect her. During the day, she was quieter than usual, more clingy. We started seeing a child therapist, Dr. Martinez, who specialized in helping kids process trauma. In our third session, Dr. Martinez asked to speak with me alone. "Chloe is going to be fine," she assured me, her kind eyes crinkling at the corners. "But Sarah, you need to understand something. Children learn their self-worth from how they see their parents being treated, and how their parents allow themselves to be treated. You standing up for her, removing her from that toxic environment, that's teaching her that she deserves respect. That's the most important lesson you could ever give her." Those words stayed with me, a mantra I repeated whenever doubt crept in, whenever the guilt of cutting off my family threatened to overwhelm me, because the guilt did come, in waves, usually late at night when I was alone with my thoughts. Had I overreacted? Was a dirty diaper really worth destroying family relationships over? Shouldn't I be the bigger person? But then I'd remember Chloe's face, the fear in her eyes, the way she'd trembled against my leg, and I'd know I'd made the right choice. This wasn't about a diaper. It was about a lifetime of disrespect, of being made to feel less than, and of watching my daughter begin to absorb those same toxic messages about her worth. I started journaling, writing down every incident I could remember of Victoria's cruelty and my parents enabling it. The time Victoria accidentally pushed me into a pool at her birthday party, ruining my phone and favorite jacket, and my parents made me apologize for making a scene. The time she stole my college essay idea and got into her dream school while I was rejected. The time she told everyone at Thanksgiving that I'd gotten fired from my job when really I'd quit because of harassment, making me look incompetent while she was praised for her professional success. Page after page, year after year, a documented history of abuse that I'd normalized because it was all I'd ever known. Writing it down made it real in a way it had never been before. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. I had been systematically devalued and dismissed my entire life, and I'd been so desperate for my parents' love that I'd accepted it as normal. My best friend Jessica had been telling me this for years, but I'd always brushed her off with excuses about family being complicated. Now, sitting in her kitchen while Chloe played with her kids in the backyard, I finally heard what she'd been trying to say all along. "Sarah, you've been in survival mode your whole life," Jessica said, pouring us both another cup of coffee. "You've been so busy trying to earn love that should have been freely given that you couldn't see how abnormal it all was. I'm proud of you for finally drawing that line. I know it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. Some days it felt impossible. I missed the illusion of family, the fantasy I'd constructed in my head about reconciliation and change, but reality kept reasserting itself through my mother's increasingly manipulative texts before I blocked her, through mutual acquaintances who'd tell me that Victoria was playing the victim brilliantly, telling everyone I'd had a psychotic break and attacked her for no reason. Then came the visit to Daisy's flower shop. I'd been going there for years, buying cheap bouquets to brighten up our apartment. Daisy, the 70-something owner, had always had a kind word and a knowing smile. This time, as she wrapped up a bundle of sunflowers, she looked at me with unusual directness. "You look different," she said. "Lighter somehow, even though I can see you're carrying something heavy." I found myself telling her everything. The whole sordid story spilled out of me in that little flower shop that smelled of roses and fresh earth. Daisy listened without interruption, her weathered hands continuing to work with the flowers, creating small arrangements as I talked. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she looked up at me. "My dear, sometimes to let a flower bloom properly, you have to cut away the diseased branches. It's not cruel. It's necessary. Those branches will drain the life from the healthy parts if you let them. What you did, walking away, that wasn't abandoning your family. That was saving yourself and your daughter from being strangled by their sickness." She handed me the sunflowers, refusing payment. "These are for strength," she said, "for remembering that you grow toward the light, not toward the darkness, no matter how familiar that darkness might feel." I kept those sunflowers on my kitchen table until they dried out. A reminder that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is create distance from people who hurt you. even when those people are supposed to love you most. It was during this period of healing and rebuilding that I discovered something that made my blood run cold. I was scrolling through old Facebook messages, deleting threads with my family members, when I found a conversation from 2 years ago between Victoria and Richard that she'd accidentally sent to me instead of her friend. In it, she'd systematically poisoned his perception of me before he'd even met me, telling him I was unstable, jealous, a bad mother, that I'd always been envious of her success. Richard and I had never been close, but I'd always wondered why he'd been so cold to me at family gatherings, why he'd seemed to judge me harshly for being a single mother when he'd been nothing but supportive of Victoria's career ambitions. Now I knew. Victoria had laid the groundwork to ensure that if I ever spoke up about her behavior, I'd already be discredited in the eyes of the man she was going to marry. The calculating cruelty of it took my breath away. This wasn't just sibling rivalry or favoritism. This was systematic manipulation. And I had documentation of it. I screenshot the conversation and saved it to 3 different places. I didn't know if I'd ever use it, but knowing the truth, having evidence that I wasn't crazy or oversensitive, that gave me a kind of strength I'd never had before. 2 months after the incident, my phone rang from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. It was Victoria, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Sarah, it's me. I've been so worried about you. Are you still upset about that silly misunderstanding? Come on. It was just a joke that went a little too far. Chloe's a tough kid. She needs to learn not to be so sensitive. You're raising her to be weak if you coddle her like this." The old Sarah would have wavered, would have doubted herself, would have apologized for causing trouble. The new Sarah, the one who'd spent 2 months working with Dr. Martinez on setting boundaries and recognizing manipulation, heard those words for what they were. "Victoria, what you did to my daughter wasn't a joke. It was abuse. And this call, trying to gaslight me into thinking it was no big deal, that's manipulation. I'm not interested in maintaining a relationship with someone who thinks traumatizing a 7-year-old is funny. Don't call this number again." I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking but my resolve firm. Within minutes, my mother called from a different number. "How dare you hang up on your sister?" Eleanor's voice was shrill with indignation. "Victoria is about to get married. Sarah, this is supposed to be the happiest time of her life, and you're trying to ruin it with your petty grudges. What kind of sister are you? The kind who prioritizes her child's well-being over playing nice with her abuser," I said calmly. "And the kind who's finally realized that your love has always been conditional, reserved only for the daughter who makes you look good. I'm done competing for scraps of affection. Mom, I deserve better. And so does Chloe." "You're so selfish," my mother cried. "After everything we've done for you, we raised you, fed you, put a roof over your head. And this is how you repay us, by being cruel to your sister on the most important day of her life?" The same old song, the same old manipulation. Family means sacrifice. Family means swallowing your pain. Family means you're selfish if you dare to have needs of your own. You didn't do me a favor by raising me. Mom, that was your job as a parent. And yes, you put a roof over my head. You also put Victoria on a pedestal and me in a shadow. You taught me that my pain didn't matter, that speaking up for myself was causing drama, that I should be grateful for whatever scraps of affection you tossed my way. Well, I'm breaking that cycle. Chloe will grow up knowing she matters, knowing her feelings are valid, knowing that she never has to accept abuse in the name of family. If you don't come to this wedding, don't bother coming to any family events ever again," my mother said, her voice cold with ultimatum. "Mom, I already told you. I'm not coming back to your house. I'm not subjecting myself or my daughter to Victoria's cruelty anymore. If that means I'm cut off from the family, then that's your choice, not mine. I tried for 28 years to be good enough for you. I'm done trying." I hung up and blocked that number too. My hands were shaking, tears streaming down my face. But underneath the pain was something else. Relief, clarity, freedom. The wedding invitation arrived by mail 2 weeks later. Formal and elegant. Cream-colored cardstock with gold embossing. "Victoria Harper and Richard Crawford request the pleasure of your company at their engagement party and upcoming nuptials." There was a handwritten note attached in Victoria's perfect cursive, Sarah, I know we've had our differences, but you're still my sister. Mom and Dad would be heartbroken if you weren't there. Please come to the engagement party. Let's put the past behind us. For family. Love. Victoria. I stared at that note for a long time, analyzing every word choice, every subtle manipulation. Our differences minimizing her abuse to a simple disagreement. Mom and Dad would be heartbroken using my parents' feelings to guilt me into compliance. For family, the ultimate trump card, the one that had always worked before. But this time, I saw it all clearly. And this time, I had a choice to make. I could stay away, maintain my boundaries, keep Chloe safe in our peaceful little bubble. Or I could go and finally say the things I'd never been brave enough to say. I could stop being the silent victim and become someone who spoke truth to power, even if that power was just my dysfunctional family's ability to pretend everything was fine. I made my decision, but I wasn't going to go in blind, and I wasn't going to go in weak. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing. I practiced what I would say with Jessica, role-playing every possible reaction. I made copies of every piece of evidence I had of Victoria's manipulation and cruelty. I even bought a new dress. Nothing fancy, but something that made me feel confident and strong. The night before the engagement party, I sat Chloe down. Baby, we're going to see Grandma and Grandpa and Aunt Victoria tomorrow. I know that's scary after what happened, but Mommy needs to do something important. I need to tell the truth, where everyone can hear it. You don't have to do anything except stay close to me and be brave. Can you do that? Chloe's eyes were wide, but she nodded. Will Aunt Victoria be mean to us again? She might try, I admitted, not wanting to lie to her. But this time, Mommy's going to make sure everyone knows exactly what she did. Sometimes bad people get away with bad things because good people stay quiet. I'm not going to stay quiet anymore. Okay, Mommy, Chloe said. And then, in a voice so small it broke my heart, I'm proud of you. I held her close, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. Feeling the fierce protective love that had given me the courage to do this in the first place. The engagement party was being held at Riverside Manor, one of those old mansion venues with manicured gardens and a ballroom that dripped crystal chandeliers. Cars lined the circular driveway, expensive sedans and luxury SUVs, the kind of crowd my parents cultivated, the kind that measured worth in job titles and designer labels. Chloe held my hand tightly as we walked up the stone steps. I was wearing a simple navy dress that Jessica had helped me pick out, classic and elegant, without trying to compete with whatever Victoria would be wearing. My hair was pulled back in a neat bun. Minimal makeup, pearl earrings my grandmother had left me. I looked like someone who had nothing to prove because I didn't. Not anymore. The doorman opened the heavy oak doors, and we stepped into a world of wealth and pretension. The foyer was filled with people holding champagne flutes. The women in cocktail dresses that cost more than my monthly salary. The men in suits that screamed old money. Somewhere in the background, a string quartet played something classical and forgettable. I spotted my parents almost immediately. My mother was wearing a pale pink dress that probably cost a fortune, her hair freshly colored and styled, diamonds at her throat and wrists. My father stood beside her in his best suit, the one he wore to important business dinners, looking distinguished and successful. They were holding court with some couple I didn't recognize, playing the role of proud parents of the bride-to-be. And then I saw Victoria. She was in the center of the room, of course, wearing a white cocktail dress that managed to be both elegant and attention-grabbing. Her engagement ring, catching the light every time she gestured. Richard stood beside her, tall and handsome in his tailored suit, his arm around her waist, looking every inch, the successful CEO in love. Victoria saw me almost at the same time I saw her. Her expression flickered, surprise and irritation. Before settling into a practiced smile, she excused herself from the group she'd been entertaining and made her way toward us, Richard following behind. Sarah, she said, her voice loud enough for nearby guests to hear, pitched to sound warm and sisterly. I'm so glad you came. I was worried you were still upset about our little misunderstanding. Little misunderstanding. She was already rewriting history, already setting the narrative before I could say a word. I felt Chloe's hand tighten in mine, felt her move slightly behind my leg, and that small gesture of fear made something inside me crystallize into diamond-hard resolve. "Hello, Victoria," I said calmly. "Richard." I nodded to him politely. He nodded back, his expression neutral, but his eyes showing a hint of the prejudice Victoria had instilled in him about me. Victoria's smile widened, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Darling, this is my little sister Sarah and her daughter Chloe." "Sarah, you remember Richard, don't you?" The emphasis on little sister was subtle but deliberate, a reminder of our hierarchy in her world. "Yes, we've met," I said. "Congratulations on your engagement." "Thank you," Victoria beamed, holding out her hand so the ring caught the light again. It was massive, a 3-carat diamond surrounded by smaller stones. Ostentatious in its perfection. "Isn't it gorgeous? Richard has such impeccable taste." I didn't take the bait, didn't gush over the ring like she clearly expected. Instead, I said, "It's very sparkly." Chloe made a small sound that might have been a suppressed giggle. Victoria's smile tightened just slightly. "Well, we're just so happy to have everyone here celebrating with us, aren't we, darling?" She looked up at Richard adoringly. He smiled down at her, and I felt a pang of something that wasn't quite pity but close. He had no idea who he was marrying. He saw the performance, the careful construction of perfection, and thought it was real. A waiter passed by with a tray of champagne glasses. Victoria snagged 2, offering one to me. "Here, let's have a drink. To family." She brought the glass close to my face, her smile taking on that edge I knew so well, the one that said she was daring me to make a scene. I took the glass, but I didn't drink. Instead, I held it carefully, like it was made of something more fragile than crystal. "Actually, Victoria, I'm glad you mentioned family, because that's what I came here to talk about." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Oh, what about family? About what family means," I said clearly, my voice carrying just far enough that people nearby began to turn their attention toward us. "About what it should mean, versus what it actually means in ours." Victoria's laugh was brittle. "Sarah, this isn't really the time or place for one of your philosophical discussions. This is a party, a celebration. Can't you just be happy for me for once in your life?" "I was happy for you," I said. "I was happy for you when you got into your dream college, even though you stole my essay idea to get there. I was happy for you when you got promoted. Even though you took credit for my proposal, I was happy for you at every milestone, every achievement, even the ones you achieved by stepping on me. But I can't be happy about you marrying Richard without him knowing who you really are." The room was getting quieter now, more people turning to watch what was clearly becoming something more than polite conversation. My mother had noticed and was making her way toward us, my father trailing behind, both of them wearing expressions of alarm. "Sarah," Victoria hissed, her mask slipping just slightly. "What do you think you're doing?" "I'm telling the truth," I said simply. "Something I should have done a long time ago." "Sarah, honey, why don't we go outside and talk privately?" My mother had arrived, her hand reaching for my arm, her voice strained with forced cheerfulness. "No need to bore everyone with family matters." I stepped back from her touch, keeping Chloe safely behind me. "No, Mom, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not going to be quiet so Victoria can keep playing perfect while I'm painted as the difficult one. I'm done protecting her reputation at the expense of my dignity." My father's face was red, his jaw clenched. "Sarah, that's enough. You're embarrassing yourself." "I'm embarrassing myself." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a man who'd chosen comfort over courage his entire life. "No, Dad." I'm finally standing up for myself. "There's a difference." Richard looked confused, glancing between Victoria and me. "What's going on here, Victoria? What is she talking about?" Victoria's voice rose, shrill with panic she was trying to hide. "She's talking nonsense. Darling, Sarah has always been jealous of me. She makes up these stories, these exaggerations, because she can't stand that I'm successful and happy. Tell him, Mom, tell him how Sarah always does this." My mother opened her mouth, but I spoke first. 6 weeks ago, Victoria tried to shove a soiled diaper in my 7-year-old daughter's face because Chloe didn't call her Queen Victoria. The words fell into the room like stones into still water, creating ripples of shocked silence. Richard's face went pale. Several people gasped. My mother looked like she might faint. That's a lie, Victoria's voice cracked. Richard. She's lying, I would never. It's not a lie, I said calmly. I reached into my purse and pulled out the tissue I'd kept. The one Victoria had used to hold the diaper, sealed now in a plastic bag. The stain was still visible, the evidence undeniable. This is what she used to pick it up. I kept it. I kept it because I knew this moment would come. When she'd try to deny what she did, I held it up. And the reaction was immediate. People recoiled, their faces showing disgust and confusion. My mother made a strangled sound. My father's expression shifted from anger to something closer to horror as he realized I had proof. And when I confronted her about it, I continued, my voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through me. My mother told me I was overreacting. My father told me to leave if I couldn't control my temper. Victoria called it a joke. A joke. Humiliating a child with human waste is apparently comedy in our family. Richard pulled away from Victoria, his face a mask of shock and revulsion. Tell me this isn't true. Victoria. Tell me you didn't do that. It wasn't. Victoria's voice faltered, her perfect facade crumbling. It was just... She wasn't being respectful. She needed to learn. She's 7 years old. Richard's voice rose for the first time, genuine anger breaking through his usually composed demeanor. You tried to put a dirty diaper in a 7-year-old's face. What the hell is wrong with you? Don't talk to her like that. My mother tried to intervene, but Richard ignored her. His attention focused entirely on Victoria. Is this true? He demanded. I need you to tell me right now if this is true. Victoria's eyes filled with tears, but they looked calculated, a last-ditch attempt at manipulation. You don't understand. Richard. Sarah has always been this way. Always trying to make me look bad. Always competing with me. I was just trying to teach the child some manners. And Sarah completely overreacted. And now she's trying to ruin the happiest day of my life because she's jealous. I turned to Chloe, who had been so brave, standing quietly behind me this whole time. Chloe, sweetheart, can you tell Richard what happened that night? Can you tell him what Aunt Victoria did? Chloe stepped forward, her small voice clear in the hushed room. Aunt Victoria got a dirty diaper from the baby's table. It was really stinky. She brought it close to my face and said I needed to learn to be humble because I didn't call her Queen Victoria. My mommy stopped her and threw the diaper on the floor. Then Grandma and Grandpa yelled at Mommy and said we should leave. The simple, honest account from a child carried more weight than any argument I could have made. I saw it in Richard's face. The way his expression shifted from confused anger to absolute certainty. He looked at Victoria like he was seeing her for the first time. How could you? He asked quietly. How could you do that to a child? It wasn't that bad. Victoria was desperate now, grasping at anything. The kid is fine, look at her. She's fine. Sarah is just being dramatic. She had nightmares for a week. I said, my voice breaking slightly despite my determination to stay strong. She woke up crying, asking if Victoria was going to hurt her again. We've been seeing a therapist. My 7-year-old daughter needs therapy because of what your fiancé did to her. My father tried one last time to take control. This has gone far enough. Richard. I'm sure we can explain. Explain what Richard's voice was cold. Explain how your daughter thinks it's acceptable to abuse a child. Explain how you all defended her. Explain how you made Sarah feel like she was the problem for protecting her daughter. He pulled the engagement ring off Victoria's finger with such force that she stumbled backward. This engagement is over. I will not marry someone capable of that kind of cruelty. And a family that would enable it. I want nothing to do with any of you. Victoria's scream was primal, anguished. No, Richard. Please, you can't. I love you. We're supposed to get married. But he was already walking away, pushing through the crowd of shocked guests toward the exit. Victoria tried to follow him, but her high heels and tight dress made it impossible to move quickly. She stumbled, caught herself on a side table, sending a flower arrangement crashing to the floor. The room erupted in whispers. the kind of gossip that would spread through their social circle like wildfire. I caught snippets of conversation. Did you hear what she did? A dirty diaper. That's insane. I always thought Victoria was too good to be true. Poor Richard. Dodging that bullet. My mother was crying now, mascara running down her carefully made-up face. Look what you've done. She sobbed at me. Look what you've done to your sister. To this family. How could you? I looked at her. In this woman who'd given birth to me, but had never truly seen me, and felt nothing but pity. I didn't do this. Mom. Victoria did. You did. You all did. I just finally stopped being silent about it. Victoria had given up chasing Richard and turned back to face me. Her perfect appearance completely undone now. Her hair disheveled. Her makeup smeared. Her white dress with dirt stains from where she'd fallen. She looked like a fairy tale princess who'd transformed back into something ugly and real. I hate you, she spat. Her voice venomous. I have always hated you. You were always there. Always in the way. Always needing attention. Mom and Dad should have stopped with me. You ruined everything just by existing. And there it was. The truth beneath all the cruelty. All the competition. All the years of torment. She hated me for existing. Not for anything I'd done. Just for being. I know, I said softly. I've always known. But you don't get to make me hate myself because of your hatred. Not anymore. I looked around the room at all the shocked faces. The whispers. The judgment. I came here tonight to tell the truth, I said. Loud enough for everyone to hear. This woman you've all been celebrating. The one who seems so perfect. She built that perfection by tearing me down. And my parents let her do it because it was easier than admitting their golden child was cruel. I turned back to Victoria one last time. Your crown just fell. Victoria. It was always going to fall. The only question was when. And it smells just as bad as that diaper you tried to use on my daughter. I took Chloe's hand, and we walked toward the door. Behind us, I could hear my mother wailing, my father trying to calm the guests. Victoria screaming obscenities. The sound of my family imploding was actually kind of liberating. As we stepped out into the cool night air, Chloe looked up at me. Mommy? What's going to happen now? I took a deep breath, feeling lighter than I had in years. Now, baby, they go home. We build our own life. With people who love us the right way. We find our own family. The kind that lifts us up instead of tearing us down. But what about Grandma and Grandpa and Aunt Victoria? They'll figure out their own way. I said. That's not our responsibility anymore. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The story spread through my parents' social circle faster than I'd expected. Several people reached out to me. Acquaintances I'd barely known. Telling me they'd always sensed something was off about Victoria. That they admired my courage. A few of my mother's friends actually apologized to me, saying they'd witnessed Victoria's behavior over the years, but had assumed I was fine with it, since I never said anything. That hit hard. How many people had seen me being mistreated and said nothing because I was smiling through it? How much of my suffering had been witnessed and ignored because I'd been too good at pretending everything was okay? Richard called me 3 days after the party. His voice was tired. Older somehow. Sarah, I owe you an apology, he said. Victoria told me a lot of things about you before we met. She painted you as unstable, jealous, a bad mother. I believed her. I'm ashamed to say I never questioned it. I've never tried to get to know you myself. I'm sorry. You weren't the first person Victoria manipulated, I said. And you probably won't be the last. But I appreciate the apology. I found some text messages on her phone, he continued. Messages to her friends about her plans to cut you out of family events after the wedding. About how she was going to convince your parents to rewrite their will to exclude you completely. She had it all planned out. I wasn't surprised. But hearing it confirmed still hurt. Thank you for telling me. If you ever need anything, he said. A reference. Someone to vouch for your character? Anything. Please let me know. I know I don't know you well, but I know you're a good mother who protected her child. That takes real courage. After he hung up, I sat with Chloe and told her about the call. See? Baby. Sometimes when you stand up for yourself, Other people notice. They see your strength. And it inspires them too. Victoria tried to contact me several times. Her messages ranging from apologetic to threatening. I didn't respond to any of them. My parents sent a letter. A formal, typed document that read like a legal notice, informing me that I was no longer welcome at family gatherings and that I had been removed from their will. They framed it as punishment, as if losing their money and their toxic presence was supposed to devastate me. I framed the letter and hung it in my home office. A reminder that sometimes the trash takes itself out. 3 months after the engagement party disaster, Chloe came home from school with a drawing. It showed 2 figures, one tall and one small, holding hands. Above the tall figure's head was a crown, sparkling with crayon glitter. At the bottom, in her careful, 7-year-old handwriting, she'd written, "My mommy is the only queen I need." I cried when I saw it. Happy tears. Healing tears. Tears for the little girl inside me who'd never had anyone stand up for her, who'd spent her whole childhood believing she wasn't worth defending. That little girl finally had a champion, and that champion was me. We hung the picture on the refrigerator, right in the center, where we could see it every day. It became a symbol of our new life, the one we were building without the weight of toxic family dragging us down. I started going back to school part-time, pursuing the degree I'd abandoned when I got pregnant with Chloe. I made new friends, real friends who valued me for who I was, rather than tolerating me out of obligation. Chloe thrived in therapy, her nightmares gradually fading, her confidence growing. We created our own traditions. Just the 2 of us. Sunday morning, pancakes with faces made of fruit. Monthly trips to the aquarium. Weekly visits to Daisy's flower shop, where Daisy would let Chloe help arrange bouquets and would share her wisdom about growth and pruning and knowing when to let go of things that no longer serve you. 6 months after I walked out of that engagement party, I ran into one of Victoria's former friends at the grocery store. She looked uncomfortable but stopped to talk. "I just wanted you to know," she said quietly. "Victoria's having a really hard time. She lost her job, her condo. Richard wasn't the only person who cut her off after that night. A lot of people started looking at her differently. I started remembering things she'd done, things they'd overlooked before. She's living with your parents now." I felt a small twinge of something. Not quite pity, but a distant sadness for the life Victoria could have had if she'd chosen to be kind instead of cruel. "I hope she gets help," I said. And I meant it. Not for her sake, but because cruelty like hers comes from a deep well of pain. And pain like that hurts everyone it touches. "What about you?" the friend asked. "How are you doing?" I looked down at Chloe, who was carefully selecting apples and putting them in our cart, humming to herself, completely at peace. "We're doing really well," I said. "Better than we've ever been." And it was true. Without the constant stress of managing my family's dysfunction, of walking on eggshells around Victoria's moods, of trying to earn love that was never going to be freely given, I had space to breathe, space to heal, space to build the kind of life I actually wanted, not the one I'd been told I should want. I started dating again, cautiously. Nothing serious yet, but the possibility of it felt hopeful rather than frightening. I was learning what healthy relationships looked like, how to recognize red flags, how to trust my own judgment about people's character. Chloe made friends easily at school, drawn to kind kids who shared their toys and invited her to birthday parties. She'd learned from watching me that she didn't have to accept mean behavior, that she could walk away from people who made her feel small. She was growing up with a sense of self-worth I'd never had at her age, and that felt like the greatest achievement of my life. One evening, almost a year after everything had happened, Chloe asked me a question that took my breath away. "Mommy, do you think Grandma and Grandpa miss us?" I considered lying, giving her a soft answer that would make it hurt less. But I'd promised myself I would always be honest with her, even when the truth was hard. "I don't know, baby," I said. "Maybe they do. But missing someone isn't the same as changing for them. They miss who they wanted us to be. The people who would accept how they treated us without complaining. They don't miss who we really are. Do you miss them?" "I miss the idea of them," I admitted. "I miss having grandparents for you who would love you the way you deserve. I miss the fantasy I had of a family that was supportive and kind. but I don't miss the reality of how they actually treated us. Chloe thought about this for a moment. I'm glad we left, she said finally. I like it better now. You smile more. Out of the mouths of babes. She was right. I did smile more. I laughed more. I slept better. The constant knot of anxiety that had lived in my stomach for as long as I could remember had finally dissolved. I was learning what it felt like to live without fear, without the constant expectation of criticism, without the need to make myself smaller to accommodate other people's egos. The journey wasn't always easy. There were still days when doubt crept in, when the old programming kicked in and whispered that I was being selfish, that family should forgive, that I should have tried harder. On those days, I would read my journal entries from before I'd cut them off, reminding myself of the reality I'd escaped. I'd look at Chloe, thriving and confident, and remember why I'd made this choice. I also joined a support group for people who'd gone no contact with toxic family members. Hearing other people's stories, realizing I wasn't alone in this experience, that helped more than I can say. There's something powerful about sitting in a room with people who understand that sometimes love isn't enough, that blood relation doesn't excuse abuse, that choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. Through the support group, I met Linda, a woman in her 50s who'd cut off her narcissistic mother 20 years earlier. The guilt doesn't completely go away, she told me during one coffee meetup, but it gets easier. And eventually, you realize that the guilt is just programming, just another way they controlled you. You don't actually owe anyone your suffering, not even family. Those words became another mantra, something I repeated to myself whenever the doubt got loud. Now, standing in my apartment with Chloe's drawing on the fridge, with sunflowers from Daisy's shop brightening up the kitchen table, with the sound of my daughter's laughter as she played in her room, I felt something I'd never really felt before. Peace. Real, genuine peace. This wasn't a fairy tale ending. Victoria didn't apologize. My parents didn't suddenly realize their mistakes and beg for forgiveness. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no healing of old wounds through the power of love and understanding. Real life isn't like that. Sometimes people don't change. Sometimes families stay broken. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away and build something new. But here's what did happen. I learned that I was strong enough to stand alone. I learned that my daughter's well-being was worth more than my family's approval. I learned that the people who truly love you don't require you to diminish yourself to make them comfortable. I learned that choosing myself wasn't selfish. It was necessary. Chloe learned that she deserved respect. That no one, not even family, has the right to humiliate her. She learned that her mother would always protect her. That speaking up is brave. That walking away from toxicity is strength, not weakness. And maybe, just maybe, someone out there who's reading this story, someone who's been making themselves small to keep the peace, someone who's been accepting cruelty in the name of family, maybe they'll see themselves in my story and realize they deserve better too. Because here's the truth I wish someone had told me years ago: you don't owe anyone your suffering. Not your parents. Not your siblings. Not anyone. If a relationship requires you to suppress your pain, to accept abuse, to make yourself less than you are, then that relationship isn't worth keeping. Family should be your safe place, not your prison. The crown Victoria wanted so badly, the one built on making others feel small so she could feel big. It crumbled the moment someone refused to bow. Real crowns, the ones worth wearing, are built on love, on lifting others up, on being brave enough to protect the people who can't protect themselves. I'm teaching Chloe to wear hers with pride. And I'm finally learning to wear mine too. Not a crown of perfection or superiority, but a crown of self-respect, of boundaries, of knowing my worth. It's not made of gold or jewels. It's made of every moment I chose dignity over approval, of every time I chose truth over false peace, of every day I choose to build a life I'm proud of rather than one designed to please people who would never be pleased. That's my revenge, if you want to call it that. Not hurting them back, but healing myself. Not making them pay, but refusing to pay with my peace anymore. Not destroying their lives, but building a better one for me and my daughter. And you know what? It's the sweetest revenge there is. So here's my question for you. Have you ever had to walk away from a toxic relationship, family or otherwise, to protect yourself or someone you love? How did you find the courage to do it? Drop your stories in the comments below. Let's build a community of people who chose themselves, who set boundaries, who understand that sometimes love means saying no. And if my story resonated with you, if you see yourself in my struggle or my strength, please hit that like button and subscribe. These stories matter. Your story matters. Together, we can change the narrative that says family always comes first. No matter the cost, sometimes you have to come first. And that's not just okay. It's necessary. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, you're worth protecting. You're worth defending. You're worth the crown of self-respect. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise.